Yes, Siri, we are live now.
Okay.
I will just give a brief introduction, and then we'll directly go to your lecture, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah.
Okay. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa sahbihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. Uh, This session will be in English as Sidi Muhammad Iqbal lives in Birmingham, and he is an English speaker. But we will conduct our introduction session in Bangla for our Bengali audience. Inshallah, it will be helpful for all of us to know about the Mawlid issue and the issue we are going through in recent times about the Bidat and the Usul of Bidat. We will discussing all these issues with Sidi Muhammad Iqbal. And it's a great opportunity for all of you to ask your question directly in this post and in the comment. So we will give this question to Sidi Muhammad Iqbal, and Sidi will answer all this question, inshallah. So we have with us our Ustad, Sidi Muhammad Iqbal Hafizahullah, and we have one of our brother, Rukunuzzaman, with us. Sidi, how are you?
Alhamdulillah. الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن سيدنا مولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. I've been given these questions, but I want to talk about because today was supposed to, inshallah, next week we'll pick up, but today was supposed to be on Usul al-Fiqh, and so something that is connected to it, not solely, but there is a connection to it. So if I'll talk about the concept of bid'ah and what our scholarship, by our I mean the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, then rather than specifically the Malikiyah, but we will cover all of them, inshallah. There is an ayah you'll find in Surah Hadid, ayah 27, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about, monasticism. The Christians innovated that, and Allah talks about it, that, they innovated. But then you see, Allah says they innovated for the sake of God. They innovated for the sake of God, but then they did not stay true to what they had innovated. It's ayah 27 if people want to look it up. But you see here, especially, Shaykhul Islam, Imam Ibn Ashur, rahmatullah alayh, in his tafsir. And Imam Ibn Ashur, by the way, it's not someone who is not known to the scholarship of South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. I think all of you know of Imam Maulana Shafi, who wrote the commentary on the Quran in Urdu. And one of the works that he relied on is that of Imam Ibn Ashur. And Imam Ibn Ashur was well known. And as I said, he's one of, the last great Shaykhul Islam we have from, Tunis. And he says, this is the asl of the taqseem of bid'ah. So first of all, from fiqh itself. So when we study any point of fiqh, and again, this is a lesson for me and all that are listening, is that you need to define the word. When I was at uni quite some time ago, the professor, he said, if you do not know the meaning of the word, don't use it. If you do not know the meaning of the word, do not use it. So the word bid'ah in Arabic is defined because it is an Arabic word. It's not, in English or Urdu or Bangla word. And the meaning of it is that, it does not have an asl. That, something is brought into being. This is, more to do with the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that, from nothingness, He brings creation into being. So the word bid'ah is that, it does not have, it has never preceded before, so it does not have an asl. That is, the linguistic meaning of the word bid'ah. And from this, definition, this ta'rif, helps us immensely. So anything that is a bid'ah, does not have an asl. And quite rightly, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, talked about bid'ah, that, is dalala, is misguidance. So the misguidance that it's talking about is the literal meaning of bid'ah, that it does not have an asl. It does not have an asl here in our time, and after the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam till the Day of Judgment, the asl has to be first the kitab, then the sunnah, not anything else. Yeah, the asl has to be in the kitab and then in the sunnah. So from the kitab, we already have a reference to that, the Christian monks, they innovated monasticism. In Arabic they call them rahab, where people withdraw themselves. It's like in India, they call them sannyasis, where they take sannyas and they just leave society. This is what was innovated by the Christians. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says they didn't live up to what they had done. They didn't keep to their word. So here is there, again, I'm not going to go too much into this ayah. There is no, blame, because Allah is saying what they did was to come close to Him. But the blame is they did not stick to it. Yeah? And this is, the argument that Imam Ibn Ashur brings. Now, within the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and if I broaden it up to Muslim scholarship, we only have two opinions on bid'ah. That either it's bid'ah sa'i'ah, bad bid'ah, an evil bid'ah, whichever word you want to use, or there is, a good bid'ah, bid'ah hasana. Now, and both of these positions, by the way, within Muslim scholarship and within the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, are valid positions. One is not, more correct than the other. People who will say that, that people who do not hold to taqseem of bid'ah are misguided, and people who hold to taqseem of bid'ah are, people of bid'ah. This is just not, mature scholarship. This is, what I would say is lazy scholarship. That's what it is. Not lazy scholarship, because, you are not comprehensively understanding your subject that you are commenting or talking on. And this is, something that, the Andalusi scholars, especially Imam Shatibi rahmatullah alayh, he says that any point that you're looking at, you have to collect all the evidence for your position and against your position, and then, come to a conclusion. It's like, another way of understanding it is that, you've got this beautiful painting, really beautiful painting, and you can't appreciate the painting. Why? Because, with a telescope, you have zoomed in too close. All you can see is the dots. You can only see the dots. You've got to zoom out and step back and look at the fuller picture. Once you see the fuller picture, then you can, come to a conclusion or come to an opinion. Because what you've got to understand is that anyone who says that this is a bid'ah, that's an opinion. Yeah? It's not a Shari hukum, it's an opinion of that scholar. Yeah? Now, then, if anyone says this is, bid'ah sayyi'ah, that's an opinion. Yeah? And then when someone says this is, bid'ah hasana, because we accept, the taqseem of bid'ah, that again is an opinion. It's not a Shari hukum. Because we've got to understand that our scholarship is not clergy. This is really, really important. We're talking about scholarship within the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Just because, a scholar says this is this and this is this, it does not become, hukum shara'i. Yeah, hukum shara'i is that it has to be based and evidenced from the Kitab and Sunnah, and there's a musalsal of scholarship on that. Yeah, okay. So once we've understood this, we've got to look at, what is the lawgiver? The lawgiver, the Shari, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, is the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam. There is no other lawgiver. Yeah, the Shari within what people call the Sharia in English. I prefer the name, prophetic law, because Dr. Umar Abdullah Farooqi, Hafizullah, he says this is more correct rather than saying divine law. Yeah. Now, the lawgiver is Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have this, people who say that there is no taqseem of bid'ah, they will bring, the ahadith where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's a well-known, that's how he began the khutbah. Yeah. That, something innovated, muhdith, is dalala. Yeah, it's misguidance. Now, is that, is that a general opinion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or is there, more to this? Yeah, then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, did the Prophet expand on this? Did he explain it? Or how did the Sahaba radhiyallahu anhum understand this? This is what, we've got to look at. So before we move on to the companions, we are all aware of, the ahadith, which, are authentic. No one can, say that, they are not authentic. They are, authentic hadith where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that, that innovating in the innovation is a misguidance. Yeah. Now, how our usuli fuqaha have explain this, they say that, it's am, but it's khas. Yeah, it's am, it's khas. Why? Because you see, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said something general, but he meant something specific. Yeah. So anything that is innovated and we will agree with them, it's like our scholarship has said that, you know, the bid'ah here is the bid'ah in aqidah. Bid'ah is where, you know, someone is bringing into belief something that is not part of the belief. The other ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam which show another light on this, because all these well-known hadiths show that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, find fault with these innovations. Now, I want to share with you something that is recorded by Imam Muslim in the book of Zakat, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that, you know, whosoever man sanna sunnatan hasanatan, yeah, someone who innovate, man sanna sunnatan hasanatan. So, you know, we can all accept, that, you know, bid'ah is bad. Fine. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam here is saying, man sanna sunnatan hasanatan kana lahu ajraha wa ajru man amala biha. That, you know, whosoever begins a, you know, a good sunnah, he gets the reward of it and the reward of those who act on that. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also said that man sanna sunnatan sayyi'atan kana alayhi wizraha wa wizra man amila biha. Yeah, that whosoever begins an evil, sayyi'ah is, you know, evil, an evil's way, man sanna sunnatan. If I, you know, say that, you know, whoever begins an evil sunnah, he will get, you know, the punishment of it and those who act on it. Now, if there is, you know, if all bid'ah is bad, and if there is no taqseem, then how do we understand this? Yeah, because, you know, we've already hinted towards, you know, kullu muhdathatin bid'ah wa kullu bid'atin dalala wa kullu dalala fil nar. Yeah, so here outwardly there seems to be a contradiction, and then, because the thing is, right in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, something had happened, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever starts a good way, he will, you know, get the reward of it and the reward of those who act on it. And whosoever begins or starts an evil way, he will get, you know, the punishment of it and the punishment of those who act on it. Now, what this shows is that, you know, this hadith, you know, the original hadith, that all bid'ah, kullu muhdathatin bid'ah, that all innovation, or all new things are innovations, and so every innovation is misguidance, and every misguidance is in the fire. So either this is, you know, specific, or we can't make sense of you know, this, whoever begins a new way. Now, if we go to, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's successors, if we go to his successors, we find there are certain things that were done after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which he had not done. And I don't want to go through the usual list, but I want to just look at how the deputies of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Khulafa Rashidin al-Mahdiyin, how they understood this. If every bid'ah was dalala, and then how did they understand whoever begins a new way, he will have reward of it. Now all of us, come Ramadan, this is the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, not the people who are begin the Salatul Taraweeh. Now Salatul Taraweeh, whatever whichever madhab you follow, they have their own terminology of what it is. Now, the one who began it, the Salatul Taraweeh, you find when he went back, after, because alhamdulillah, all of us are familiar with the story, how it began, that the Khalifa Umar radiallahu anh, he came to the mosque and he found small groups of people praying, and he said, wouldn't it be better if they were reading, praying behind one imam? The next time he came back, he had because he had given instructions that a certain Sahabi would lead, so there was a Jamaat now standing. So he comes, looks at this, and he says, Ni'matu bid'ah hadihi. Ni'matu bid'ah hadihi. That, this is, a good bid'ah. Now, this is, evidence for people who accept Taqseem, and also for people who don't accept Taqseem. Our argument is the same. But it's the understanding we're looking at of Sayyidina Umar, because he used this word, Ni'matul Bid'ah. He was fully aware that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had used this word, kullu muhdathatin bid'ah wa kullu bid'atin dalala. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had said, all new innovated things, all of them are bid'ah, dalala, misguided, and all of misguidance is in the fire. But he used this word, ni'matu bid'ati hadihi. So how to understand, we're trying to understand what our scholarship has said, that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, what he did, there were people who disagreed with him vehemently, because this was not something that all companions radiallahu anhum accepted what he had done. They disagreed with him, and they did not join in the Jamaat. However, what he had done, he was happy. He said, look, this is a good bid'ah. So if we go back to the original, when we when we began this conversation that, the understanding is of the word itself. So bid'ah means that it does not have a basis before it. While when Sayyidina Umar is using this ni'matu bid'ah hadihi, there is a basis before it, because the Prophet ﷺ led, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum for certain nights, and then he didn't. He stopped it because he was afraid that it would become legislated as an obligation. But here we find that Sayyidina Umar used this word bid'ah hadihi, and his understanding, this is what, the people who accept taqseem, they accept it as that, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam actions were the asl, and this was, just basing the new actions on the old one. The people who don't accept taqseem, they will say that, this is just bringing a new sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam back to life. But you see, alhamdulillah, that is their position. We accept it. But our question is that the Prophet, Sayyidina Umar did not say ni'mat sunnah hadihi. He did not say, what a beautiful sunnah we have revived. Sayyidina Umar used ni'matu bid'ah hadihi, that, this is a good bid'ah, this. Then his son, Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anh, when he saw, a group of people, praying tahajjud, because nafil, sorry, not tahajjud, salatul duha in jama'ah, and he says it's a bid'ah, but ni'matu bid'ah hadi. So we've got, two companions radiallahu anhum understanding this, that, what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, man sanna sunnatan hasanatan kana lahu ajru wa ajru man amila biha. That, it's a new way that they have begun, a new good way. Sorry, let me be precise with the words of the Prophet. Man sanna sunnatan hasanatan kana lahu ajruha wa ajru man amila biha. This is not what, this cannot be understood that, people are bringing back, sunnahs of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that have, died out. So you're bringing them back. This is, the argument and understanding of those who say there's no taqseem of bid'ah. But here the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's words does not support their interpretation, because the Prophet is saying man sanna. Yeah, man sanna sunnatan hasanatan, that someone who begins a new way, a new way, kana lahu ajruha, that, they have the reward and the reward of those who did it before that. So from, just from these couple of, from, the understanding of two companions, and both of them are accepted as fuqaha, jurists from the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sayyidina Umar is, a mujtahid mutlaq, and Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar again is, a mujtahid, a faqih, someone who did understand his fiqh inside and out. So he used the same words as his father did, but again in a different context where, people were praying Salatul Duha in Jamaat. So both of these are, prayers, and both of these are ibadah. Yeah. And the argument, is there, can some people do ijtihad in worship or not? This is not, a point that we want to look at today. We just want to look at, the word bid'ah and its usage. So to, stop just here, we find that the riwayah which says all bid'ah misguidance does not mean all, because then it clashes with another saying of the Prophet that, whoever starts a new way, and then whoever starts an evil way, he will, get the reward of it, and those who practice it. So good and bad ways both. And then Sayyidina Umar called his actions, ni'matu bid'ah hadihi, that, this is a good innovation. And then Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar used describing, the worship of a group of companions who were praying Salatul Duha in Jama'at as a bid'ah, but a good bid'ah. Yeah? Okay. Now, I think we can conclude just from this, at this moment in time, that the Sahaba radhiyallahu anhum had no problem with using the word good bid'ah, especially, Sayyidina Umar, yeah, and, Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar. Okay. Now, we move to... Pardon?
Siri, now can we focus on the Mawlid issue now?
No, I will come to... Let me conclude on the taqsim. Because the thing is that, you see, if you do not understand this, the Mawlid thing is pointless. The Mawlid thing is pointless. Okay. Now, did any of, our mujtahid imams accept this taqsim of bid'ah or not? Yeah? Imam Malik, we do not have any record of him except using the word, that, there's two kinds of bid'ah. But, his famous student, the founder of the Shafi'i school, Imam Shafi'i, he's on record, and, there are authentic transmissions from him. He said, bid'ah bid'atan. Yeah? Bid'ah is of two types. Yeah? One is bad, which has no support in the Sharia. And bid'ah, which is hasana, is which has support in the Sharia. Yeah? So, it's not something that, later scholarship has come with the taqsim of bid'ah. It goes back to, the founders of the madhabs. And you will find it that, all the madhabs, that exist now, the Malikiyah, the Shafi'iyah, the Hanabila, the Hanafiyah, all of our scholarship of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah accepts and adheres to the taqsim of bid'ah. Yeah? Okay. Now, once we have accepted this, that, there is a taqsim of bid'ah, it becomes easy for us to talk about, things that the Rasul didn't do, the Sahaba didn't do, and the Tabi'een didn't do. Now, before I go on to Mawlid, the Mawlid, what is it? Yeah? What is the Mawlid? When we say Mawlid, what do we mean by the Mawlid? Is it an ibadah? Definitely not. It is not a form of worship, because then you are innovating. Yeah? It is not a form of worship. Now, did the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ever gather and talk about the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because you see, the Mawlid, that is what it is. Muslims gather and they talk about the Mawlid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah. Now, the argument has always been that, the Sahaba did not practice Mawlid. The Tabi'in did not practice Mawlid. Yeah. And the first generations did not practice it. It is something that, was innovated, and it was innovated by, by the Shia governance. And then it has been taken on and on, so on and so forth. Not the Maliki understanding of Sunnah. The other three madhabs, if I asked what's the record that we have of the Sunnah, what would be the response? One of you can answer.
Hadith Nawawi.
Yes. Yeah. That's the general, understanding that, when we say, what's the record of the Sunnah, people will say it's the books of Hadith. Yeah. Because the Imams of Hadith, they recorded, the Hadith. So, in the Muhaddiseen have come up with this general thing called, Sahah Sitta, the 6 books of Hadith. Okay. Is there any record in it of, the Sahaba sitting down and talking about the Mawlid? Now, that's the question I had. And, about 4 years ago, I ended up going through, the 6 books of Hadith, and I ended up with my own selection of each book. It's something that needs working on, but I made a selection of it. So from this, I came across, there's a chapter that, Imam Tirmizi, rahmatullahi alayhi. So here's the chapter heading. Bab ma ja'a fi miladun Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It's not my words, it's the word of Imam Tirmizi, who is, this is, one of the 6 collections, authentic collections of Sunni Hadith. Yeah? We won't go into it why the Muwatta is there. That's not our topic today. But, this is Imam Tirmizi, is an Imam of the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. He's an Imam of, the people of Hadith, he's an Imam of the people of Hadith, and he has a chapter of, chapter what has come regarding the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And with his sanad, his sanad is that, related to as Muhammad bin Bashar Al-Abdi, yeah, related to as Wahb bin Jarir, related to us, my father, who said, I heard Muhammad bin Ishaq, relating from Mutlab bin Abdullah bin Qais bin Mukhrama, from his father, who narrated from his grandfather, who said that I and the emissary of God, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, were born in the year of the elephant. And Uthman bin Affan asked Hubayth bin Ash'am, the brother of the sons of Yamr bin Layth, are you older or was the emissary of God, the prayer and peace of Allah be upon him and his family, he said, the emissary of God, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was older than I, and I preceded him in birth. The emissary of God, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was born in the year of the elephant. My mother raised me over the place, and he said, I saw the dung of the elephants turning green. Imam Tirmidhi says this hadith is Hasan Gharib. Now it's hadith number 3619. Now this hadith, not only, are they aware of, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is born, they're also aware of the year he is born, and they can also recall, the dung of the elephants that, Abraha bought at that time. And this, from an evidence point of view, especially, the wording that Imam Tirmizi has used, the word is interesting because, the concept of milad, miladun Nabi, yeah, the concept of miladun Nabi, because you see, he's actually the first muhaddis that I am aware who used this. He says, bab ma ja'a fi miladun Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's his chapter heading. Then, we have another Hafid of Hadith. Again, this is a lot later. This is Hafiz Ibn Nasruddin al-Damishqi. And he actually has a 7-volume work on, the seerah. But I want to share with you the name. The full name of his work is Jami'ul Athar fi Sayri wa Mawlid al-Mukhtar. Yeah? Jami'ul Athar fi Sayri wa Mawlid al-Mukhtar. And these are, people of Hadith. These are Imams of Hadith. By the way, Imam Damishqi passed away in 842. So it's a lot after, a lot later than, Imam Tirmidhi. Imam Tirmidhi, by the way, is a contemporary of Imam Bukhari and of Imam Muslim. Okay. So this is, the asl of the Mawlid. The asl of the Mawlid is what the Sahaba radhiyallahu anhu are doing. They gathered and they talked about, the event of the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Other than that, anything more than that, because, people serving food or certain kinds of drinks, that's just hospitality that Muslims are known for. In essence, this is, the basis, the reality of what the milad is. The milad is people gather, they talk about the event of, the milad of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, how it developed, it afterwards, it rolled into something else. One of the questions is how the history of the Mawlid and its evolution. I can, rather than going back, hundreds of years, I can take you back, to the last century. if we begin from the 1950s, in the 1950s, every Muslim state had a national holiday. It was a national holiday. The government would have a national holiday on the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There would be, competitions. The government would give prizes for the best, essay written on, the seerah, that part, the birth of the Prophet. On poetry, the best poetry that would be done, and then, celebrations of the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This had continued, for hundreds of years. After the 1960s, because the Saudi state stood on its feet, and the money started going out. No, because this is, people have done their PhDs on this. I think her name is Maryam Holmes, a woman. She's actually done a whole. It was a PhD, then it got printed on the history of the Mawlid, from our times, and it got discouraged. It stopped the government stopped doing it in Egypt, Algeria. Algeria was under Tunis and Libya. Wherever the money went, the fitna went. And alhamdulillah, summa alhamdulillah, where I went in the 90s to Saudi, there were Mawlids in Mecca. And at that time, they were hidden. Now they are in the open. As to, who's actually, which Imam, which hadith scholar, I've already told you that, Imam Tirmizi is the first one to actually mention and write a chapter heading, Miladun Nabi. You've got, Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani has a whole work on the Mawlid. Imam Jalaluddin Suyuti has a work on the Mawlid. That's the Shafis. And then, from the Hanafis, Mullah Ali Qari's Mawlid is well known. Then from the Malikiya, Qutb Dardir, the author of Aqrab al-Masalik. He has a Mawlid which, Alama Bajori wrote a commentary on. Imam Sawi has one. So it's something that, from, the later scholarship of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah never had any problem till, the Saudi state came into being. South Asia. What it's, the celebrations in South Asia. I want to read to you, an opinion of, a Hanafi scholar from South Asia. This is from, Majmul Fatawa, Imam Abdul Hayy Laknawi. So, Imam Abdul Hayy Laknawi, why I've chosen this is because he's not Brelvi or Deobandi. So, this is the translation is that, after these introductory points, this is Imam Abdul Hayy Laknawi. I say the mention of the Milad in of itself is not an innovation of misguidance due to two reasons. First, the dhikr of the Mawlid, the zikr Milad, is that in which, a dhakir, a reciter recites a verse or hadith, and in its explanation makes mention. So he says that, because an ayat or a hadith is being explained in mention of the prophetic virtues and miracles, He says he also mentions a little of the events of the birth, lineage, and miraculous events which manifested at the time of the birth, as has been written by Ibn Hajar al-Makki in his Ni'mat al-Kubra al-Alim bi Mawlid Sayyid Walad al-Adam. So, Imam Abdul Hayy Laknavi, he says there is no problem as long as, there is, nothing that is in toward there. It's limited to, what is well known. And this is, something that, Hafiz Abdullah bin Sadiq al-Ghumari, rahmatullah alayh, he's well known for his stance on bringing things into, our mawlids or points of Aqidah, whatever, basing it on mawdu, made up narrations, made up hadith. He actually wrote a work where, he mentioned, all these narrations that are made up. We should stick to authentic, well-known, a section from a book of Sirah, or, a work that some of the scholars have written on the Mawlid. Coming to, the Malikiya of our time, the great Maliki Muhaddis, Sayyid Alawi, Maliki Makki, rahmatullah alayh, majority of his work is on defending the positions on the Mawlid and the positions of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. In his Mafahim and Yajib an Tasaha, he wrote the work to defend the positions of the well-known positions of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah against people who accuse, people who practice it of being mubtadis and having innovated in the deen. When if Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani or Imam Tirmizi, if they didn't know what words or what they were saying, then alhamdulillah, people have surpassed us in knowledge. I mean, our great Imams, the later ones. How to celebrate it, I can only tell you my own experience, because Sidi Hamza radiallahu anh, the great Sufi Imam from Morocco, he passed away in 2017. His Mawlid was khatams of the Quran, khatams of the Dalail Khairat, khatams of the Shifa of Qadi Iyad, and khatams of Sahih al-Bukhari. And that was his Mawlid. A lot of dhikr. And at night they would sing qasides in praise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Again, this is what he went against the norm, because in Morocco they just read the well-known practices that they will read certain books that have been written in the Mawlid. But that was something that was beautiful from Sidi Hamza radiallahu anh. And you find that the practice that is happening in South Asia, where it's, again, who am I to say that it's wrong or right? But this is my own take on it. The marches are, alhamdulillah, I personally don't agree with them. I don't agree with the marches where they make replicas of the Masjid al-Nabawi, or even I've seen them make it of the Kaaba and they parade it through the streets. Where I think where the Muslim governments were before, the Saudi money influence came in, was the right way forward, and that's what Muslim governments should do. They should make an authority which looks after teaching the seerah and the sunnah, mainly the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they take charge of it's a public holiday. People are encouraged to write poetry in praise of the Prophet, or write write their research and present it at gatherings arranged. You find that something that in South Asia, the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah has split up into two. You've got the Brelvis and you've got the Deobandis. The Brelvis have their Mawlids and they have their marches. The Deobandis they're against that, but they will have their Seerah conference. So I don't see what the difference is. This is the same with people who will say that there's no taqseem of bid'ah. Yeah, people will bring forward that the great Imam Shatibi, the great Maliki, he didn't accept taqseem of bid'ah. Yes, he didn't use that word, but he called it maslaha mursala. He said, don't call it bid'ah hasana, call it maslaha mursala. Fine, I've got no problem with that, because you're just saying it that that's for the general benefit of the Muslims, so we can do it. It's fine. It's however, the problem I have is if you accept taqseem of bid'ah, then you say this is bid'ah. It's like if the Brelvis do it, it's a bid'ah, but when you have your Seerah conference, that's not a bid'ah. Okay. I think I was given an hour.
See, there are just some little question from the audience in the comment
Yeah,
box.
Bismillah.
Like,
Yeah.
Mutasir Imran asked that what are the rewards of celebrating Mawlid? Our life is very short. How will Mawlid help us to go to paradise?
Okay. As I said, you've got to understand that the Mawlid. Mawlid is a gathering where you sit and talk about the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If that is not going to help you understand your deen, I don't know what is going to help you. Because the thing is, the asl of our deen is the criteria is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if people are not sitting and teaching and talking about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they're talking about other things, that's not a Mawlid, that's something else. The whole thing of the Mawlid is people are sitting, gathering, and they are being taught about the character and status of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the reward, there is something interesting about reward. It's something that Imam Bukhari has of Thawbiyah, one of the wet nurses of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When she came to Abu Lahab and gave the news that your brother's widow has had a son, he was so overjoyed that he gave her a ring and freed her. I'm aware of the controversy about the narration. I'm just forget about the controversy. Look at who has recorded it. It's in the Sahih of Imam Bukhari, and Imam Bukhari didn't have a problem with it. Later on, someone saw him in a dream. So this is Abu Lahab. So someone sees Abu Lahab in a dream and they ask him, how's life treating you? how's death? Excuse me. And he says, it's as the Prophet had promised, but every Monday I get water from the bottom of my thumb. And said, why? Because he says, I was so happy when the Thawiyah brought the news that, I've freed her or gave her a ring or whatever, and because of that, my punishment is lessened. Again, as I said, it's a problematic narration, but the thing is, it's there. That's the problem. It's there.
Sidi, we got a question about Sheikh Sadi asked about a controversy. Like, you can see the whole question in the private chat box. Like, Ibn Wahab said, I heard Malik being asked about people sitting in the mosque on the evening of Arafah and Asr gathering for dua. Malik replied that this is not from the practice of the people of Medina. Rather, the openings of such events are from Bidah. Whereas Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, when asked about such gathering, he said a different verdict. He said that it's fine because the gathering is only for dua and zikr. It seems that Mawlid gathering should not be allowed since gathering.
This has got nothing to do. What they need to understand is that if the people of Medina didn't do it, yes, with Imam Malik it would be, but the thing is, what has this got to do with Mawlid? Because the thing is that as I said, that the madhab accepts that there is taqseem of bid'ah. So to bring this forward that there's no taqseem, no, the taqseem is there, and later Maliki scholarship accept Imam Ibn Lub. Imam Ibn Lub is one of the great Andalusi imams. He's one of the teachers of Imam Shatibi, and he's someone who permits dua in Jamaat after the mosque, which our madhab holds it not as a bid'ah but a makruh. And the answer to this that they've brought from Ibn Wahab is that the qira'ah, which the Malikiyah do, especially in the Maghrib, after Maghrib and Isha, Maghrib and Sub, they read a hizb in this is the Jamaat, the whole Jamaat, whole Jamaat. After Salatul Sub, they read half of a spara, a hizb, together in one voice, and then after Maghrib they do the same. So in some mosques they will do it after Asr, but they do it together. Imam Malik was asked about this. He says it's not something that is done in his city, because in Medina we have the Ansar and Muhajirin, but he says he's aware of people doing it in Alexandria. And we have records of companions doing it in Basra, in the mosque in Basra and in the mosque in Damascus. But Imam Malik did not call that bid'ah. He said it's makruh, and that's the madhab, the opinion of the madhab, that reading Quran together in one voice, is makruh. It's not bid'ah. So this narration, alhamdulillah, it's good, but that's not what the amal of the school is on. And Imam Malik himself has contradicted this, because he says that the qiraat in it's called qiraat bil idara, where the whole congregation recites in one voice. Imam Malik says it's makruh. He did not call it a bid'ah.
So, Sidi, if Imam Malik is calling it makruh, should we leave it here?
No, because the thing is, what you've got to understand is, if something is makruh, you've got to understand that makruh is not haram. Makruh is still from the halal, and you've got to look at the general benefit. It's like I'll give you my own experience. If you pray Taraweeh in a mosque in Morocco, first of all, rarely you will not find the Imam makes a mistake. But when the Imam does make a mistake, it's not one person that corrects him, it's the whole Jamaat. Because, because the whole Jamaat is reading Quran, every day they're finishing a para, they become Hafizes themselves. They become very familiar with the Quran, and every day they are reading, the Jamaat is finishing a spara a day, and every month the Quran is finished in the mosque, and it's a musalsal, it never stops. So you will find that our fuqaha have no problem with that. Yes, it's graded as makruh, but they will not stop it, because you see the benefit from it is greater than stopping it. And it's the same with the Mawlid, that you see with Mawlid, with the Mawlid, you see, if it is done correctly, people become familiar with aspects of the life of the Prophet that, they, first of all, they won't generally read the seerah, which they should. My advice to people is that, they should regularly take time out every week to, read the seerah. It should be, your weekly program, that today you are going to, read some pages from the seerah. Just as you read daily from the Quran, if you can, read daily from the seerah, because it's something that brings the deen into your life, because you can see how it came about. Shaving the mustache is not makruh, is bid'ah. Yeah? With Imam Malik, it's not makruh, it's bid'ah. And Imam Malik said someone who does it, he should be taught manners. And that's in Imam Hattab's commentary on the Risal of Abi Zayd al-Kairwani. Because what you've got to understand is that, within the mustache, there are two aspects. There are these on the sides, and the mustache here, and how the people of Medina understood is you just trim the edges so the hair doesn't come over your lips. Or if you want to grow your mustache and you can train it round your lips, that is fine. But to shave it, I would like to see people bring evidence, from the Salaf. And by the Salaf, I mean the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because Sayyidina Umar would whip people if they did it. So I don't know who they get it from. It's not from the Salaf al-Salihin, which are the Sahaba radhiyallahu anhum.
So, Sidi, the very last thing, should we fast on the day of Mawlid, or like we decorate our homes?
No. There's a confusion of that. The fast is always on a Monday, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is one of, Jalaluddin Suyuti brought this forward in his work on the Mawlid, because Imam Jalaluddin Suyuti has a work, and Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani has a work. Ibn Hajar al-Haythami has a work. One of the questions was from the Muhaddiseen, depends on how far back you want to go. You will find that, once the Mawlid was accepted, our scholarship has been writing it. Ibn Dahi al-Kalbi, people say that, the Mawlid was authored on the instructions of, a Fatimid king. Ibn Dahi al-Kalbi ordered it long before that. And Imam Tirmidhi, having a chapter on the Mawlid al-Nabi is long before the Shia ever came to power. And what was the question?
Should we fast or decorate?
Oh yes, the fast. The fast is that, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam fasted on Monday. He said, And he was asked, the hadith is in Sahih Muslim. The Prophet was asked, why do you fast on Monday? He says, I fast because I was born on this day and revelation began on this day. Yeah, so the fast is always on a Monday, never on the day of Mawlid. Because you see, the 12th will not fall on the Mawlid. You know, this question that, you know, we find from people who are against the Mawlid, they say that, you know, he died on the 12th of Rabiul al-Awwal. That is the greatest lie ever told. And I'm very careful about, you know, the words I'm using. It's the greatest lie ever told. What is in agreement with scholarship is that he was born in the month of Rabiul al-Awwal. Yeah? There are different opinions, but, you know, they converge, and there's a unanimous opinion, majority opinion, which is that he was born on the 12th. Yeah? Majority of Sunni scholarship agrees on that he passed away on in the month of Rabiul al-Awwal as well, but not on the 12th of Rabiul al-Awwal. No. He passed away in the same month, but he did not pass away on the day he was born. Yeah? And people who say these things, it's up to them to bring it forward. Yeah? It's up to them to bring it forward. You know, this thing that, because the thing is that, you know, if you don't accept Taqseem of Bidah, alhamdulillah, welcome. Yeah? That's your mawqif. The people who accept Mawlid, accept the Taqseem of Bidah, they, you know, celebrate the Mawlid. Alhamdulillah, you know, you should be mature enough to say, okay, that's their opinion. That's not my opinion. Yeah? And, you know, mentioning, did this scholar accept Taqseem or this accept Taqseem? Because what you've got to understand is that majority, and you know, there was a capital M, majority of the ulama of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, yeah, not, you know, any Pacific, majority of the scholarship of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah accept Taqseem of Bidah. That's what it is. We might, some scholars might call it by different names. It's like, look, Sidi Ahmad Zarruq, he doesn't call it Bidah Sayyi'ah or Bidah Hasana. He says Bidah Idafiyah, you know, this is an additional Bidah. And then you'll find that, you know, when Imam Shatibi, he calls it Maslaha Mursala, which is saying different words but meaning the same thing. Inshallah.
And Sidi, Rabiul Awwal is the month of the birth of the Prophet, also the Wafat of the Prophet. So why should we just celebrate? We should be sad for the Wafat of the Prophet. So what should be your answer?
The thing is that, you know, when we do not know the date, where we do not have, you know, don't know the date, and we don't have general, you know, agreement on what day he passed away, I don't think this question is a relevant question, because, you know, if he passed away on that day, then fine, you can make an argument. But, you know, when you've got all of these Hufaz of Hadith and, you know, great Imams, you know, for the Malikiya, Imam Qutb Dardir is no small Imam. He's someone who, you know, revised the Mukhtasar of Sidi Khalil, and, you know, the Eastern, you know, Malikis, you know, Saudi, Iraq, Egypt, Qutb Dardir is the one that is followed. And, you know, he has a work on the Mawlid. And then, you know, as I said, that you can't, just because, you know, the scholarship now doesn't agree with you, you now go backwards to find, you know, scholars that whose opinions you agree with. No, scholarship is not stagnant. scholarship continues. Yeah. Yes, if there are bad things in the Mawlid, yeah, then those should be, highlighted. The segregation needs to happen. And alhamdulillah, I have not been to a place where this has not happened. Yeah, segregation needs to happen. And, it needs to be about the Prophet, not about something else. Yeah. And, I have a question for especially, the Deobandis of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, because they will say you can't have a Mawlid, but you can have a Seerah conference. Yeah. Yeah. Because there's no evidence for a Mawlid. Yeah. What's the evidence for a Seerah conference? Yeah. And then, you tell me how many madrasas, when they, when, the students graduate, they have a khatam of Sahih al-Bukhari, don't they? Where's the evidence for this?
See, they say this is a normal gathering, but Mawlid is not a normal gathering. You are something like this logic.
MashaAllah. You are reading, look, it says, Qala Rasulullah, Qala Rasulullah, Qala Rasulullah, in the gathering from the beginning to the end. And this is not about the Rasul. It's just, it's just, I don't know. I don't have any words for it. So what other questions do you have?
Sidi, that's all the question we got, and you answered, alhamdulillah, all of this. And I think this will be helpful for all of the people of the country.
Okay.
As much as you shared this, and people will
one thing, something that I do want to share with you, it's we have this book of fatwa. We don't have that many books of fatwa, by the way, within the madhab. It's called Miyar al-Mu'rab by Imam Sharisi. Yeah. He actually recorded. He's recorded, the fatwas of our ulama who were pro-Mawlid and fatwas of people who had problems with them. But he ended up, writing, quoting from, we have a very famous alim. His name is Imam Al-Hafiz Al-Faqih Abi Abdullah Muhammad bin Ahmad Ibn Marzuq Al-Tilmisani. And he has a work. By the way, he died in 781 Hijri. He has a book called Janal Jannatain fi Sharf al-Laylatain, Lailatul Mawlid, Lailatul Qadr, Lailatul Mawlid. So, his book, it got printed a couple of years ago, and a Khaliji scholar, he edited it. Imam Ibn Marzuq, he gives you 21 reasons why the Laylatul Mawlid is greater than the Laylatul Qadr. So, when people talk about Mawlid, people need to understand that, without the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if he is not there, there's nothing. If he is not there, if he is not born, then the deen is not there, the Quran is not there, the Sunnah is not there. And it's really interesting. I'll share the note. I've not looked over it again. I translated, the Imam Sharisi's. I've not compared it to the edited one. But it's interesting because he says that, you see, the qadr that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had is that, Allah, the word manna. Manna is, when you are pleased. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَدْ مَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ بَعَثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا. It was, the pleasure of Allah that He raised the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, when people say, can you, the only problem that people should have is things that are anti-shara. Things that, in the gathering of a Mawlid, if, things are there that are against the Sharia, then we condemn them ourselves. Yeah? As I said, Sayyid Abdullah bin Sadiq al-Ghumari, he actually wrote a work condemning the narrations that were being used, which had no basis. Yeah. So when you use authentic, reliable narrations, or you just read from a book which the great Imams have written. By the way, the Mawlids in the subcontinent, they have been influenced by the Yemeni Habaib, because I don't know if you've heard of the ulama. They're all Sadat. They're from Tarim in Yemen, and they influenced Muslims, in South Asia and Southeast Asia, and their main thing is Mawlid. When they gather, they will have a Mawlid. They will, sit and sing. Because the Mawlid is written in verse, so they will sit and sing. And when the work comes to the very birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they will all stand and send salawat on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then after that, they will sit and carry on with the rest of it. And this is, where, this standing in the Mawlid has come from in South Asia, because we don't have it in North Africa. And the interesting thing is, and something that, might be new to you, our Deobandi scholars, that they are on very good terms with the Habaib. When they are in Saudi, they take part in those Mawlids and they stand and they have no problem. But when they come back, it becomes something objectionable to stand in a Mawlid or take part in a Mawlid. But Allah knows best. But what you need to understand is that it should not be seen as an act of worship. It should be seen as, a season of, the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where you study and share, the coming of the Prophet, the message of the Prophet, and be happy. Because this is something that, when you find people are too serious, they won't even laugh. They won't even smile. And this is the thing that, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when people met him, he smiled. And he was happy. He was not someone like, always, serious. And, if people are serious most of the months, in the month of Rabiul Awwal, they should be happy. They should be happy for, the birth of the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam. And, you'll find, especially in Saudi, which is, a contradiction in terms, they will say that, you can't celebrate the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but you can celebrate the founding of Saudi Arabia. You can celebrate the founding of Saudi Arabia. So they have, their own independence days. It's like, all Muslim countries, bar from, I think all of them, have independence days. And it's, a holiday, and they celebrate. And no one has a problem with it. The great Pakistani scholar, Taqiyuddin Usmani, Hafizullah, he's on record. He said he has no problems with the celebrations of Independence Day. So again, it's people have to be straightforward. But alhamdulillah, we accept people. There's a difference of opinion, and we've got to be mature enough to accept that there are people who do not agree on the taqsim of bidah, and to them it is an innovation. But I don't think if we could take back the practices of the Mawlid back to their original, away from these marches and so on and so forth, I don't think people would have a problem with it. Allah knows best. Yeah.
So we may end now.
Okay, no problem.
For this time.
Alhamdulillah.
Inshallah, we'll start our Usul class from the next week, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. اللهم صل صلاة كاملة وسلم سلاما تاما على سيدنا محمد الذي تنحل به العقد وتنفرج به الكرب وتقضى بالحوائج وتنال به الرغائب وحسن الخواتم ويستسقى الغمام بوجهك الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه في كل لمحة ونفس بعدد كل معلوم لك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
আলহামদুলিল্লাহ, সিদি ইকবাল প্রথমত আলোচনা করলেন বিদাত ইস্যু নিয়ে, বিদাত এবং বিদাতের উসুলি কথাবার্তা নিয়ে। তিনি আমাদের কাছে পরিষ্কার করার চেষ্টা করলেন যে আসলে সাহাবাদের যুগ এবং তাবেঈদের যুগ, সালফে সালেহদের যুগ, সেই সময় থেকেই আসলে বিদাতের যে বিভাজন সেটা চলে আসছে, যে একটি ভালো বিদাত এবং খারাপ বিদাত, এই টেন্ডেন্সিটা সাহাবীদের যুগ থেকে চলে আসছে। এটা নতুন কিছু না। তো সকল বিদাতই ভুল এবং সেগুলো জাহান্নামের জন্য নিয়ে যাবে, এই কথাটা ঢালাও ভাবে বা এককভাবে কোনো অর্থ প্রকাশ ছাড়া প্রকাশ করাটা ঠিক না। এটিও সিদ্দিক ইকবাল বোঝাতে চেয়েছেন তার আলাপে। এছাড়াও তিনি তার পরবর্তীতে বিদাত নিয়ে আলোচনার পরে তাকসীর নিয়ে আলোচনা করেছেন মাউলিদের ইস্যু নিয়ে, এবং মাউলিদের সঙ্গে আমাদের সম্পর্ক, উপমহাদেশে আমরা কিভাবে মাউলিদকে দেখি এবং দুনিয়াব্যাপী আসলে মাউলিদকে কিভাবে উদযাপন করা হয় বা কিভাবে সেই বিষয়গুলো নিয়ে মাথা ঘামানো হয়, সেটাও আসলে সিদ্দিক ইকবাল আমাদের কাছে পরিষ্কার করেছেন। সিদ্দিক ইকবাল যেহেতু ইংরেজি ভাষী লোক, তিনি ইংরেজিতে বলেছেন, সহজ ভাষায় তিনি বোঝানোর চেষ্টা করেছেন। এরপরেও আপনাদের কারো যদি কোনো প্রশ্ন থাকে আমাদের পোস্টের কমেন্টে বা ইনবক্সে আমাদেরকে জিজ্ঞেস করতে পারেন, আমরা আপনাদেরকে তারপরেও বিষয়টাকে বুঝিয়ে বলার চেষ্টা করব ইনশাআল্লাহ। এবং সহজ কথা আমরা যেটা বলতে পারি যে মাউলিদকে নিয়ে আসলে এত বাড়াবাড়ি বা ছাড়াছাড়ি কোনোটা করাই ঠিক না। আল্লাহ রাসূল সাল্লাল্লাহু আলাইহি ওয়াসাল্লাম দুনিয়াতে আগমন করেছেন, এটা চেয়ে বড় কোনো সুসংবাদ আমাদের কাছে হতে পারে না, এবং এই সুসংবাদকে আমরা মনে করি যে এটা আমাদের জন্য আনন্দের একটি উৎসব এবং আনন্দের একটি আয়োজন, এবং সেটাকে আমরা আমাদের শরীয়তের যে সীমারেখা সেটার মধ্যে থেকে যতটুকু পারি আমরা ইনশাআল্লাহ আনন্দ করব এবং উদযাপন করব, যেটা সিদ্দিক ইকবাল আমাদেরকে বলে গেলেন এবং শিখিয়ে গেলেন। ইনশাআল্লাহ এরকম পডকাস্ট সামনেও আস্তে ধীরে আমরা আরো বিভিন্ন ইস্যুতে করব। আগামীতেও আমরা আমাদের পডকাস্টে আলেমদের থেকে গেস্ট রাখার চেষ্টা করব এবং তাদের কাছ থেকে আমরা মূল্যবান আলোচনা শুনবো। আমরা চেষ্টা করব ভবিষ্যতে বাঙালি আলেমদেরকেও আমাদের পডকাস্টে আমন্ত্রণ জানাতে এবং তাদের মূল্যবান আলোচনা রাখতে ইনশাআল্লাহ। তাহলে আজকে আমরা শেষ করছি। আসসালামু আলাইকুম ওয়া রাহমাতুল্লাহি ওয়া বারাকাতুহু। এতক্ষণ পডকাস্টের সাথে থাকার জন্য আপনাদের সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ। হুসেইন ভাই এবং গোপন ভাইকে, যারা পুরোটা পডকাস্ট জুড়ে সাথে ছিলেন। ইনশাআল্লাহ দেখা হবে পরবর্তী কোনো পডকাস্টে। আসসালামু আলাইকুম।